Hello and welcome to the Free Cheese, episode 469. I am your Joe Dix, joined by Mark Augustiniak.
What's up?
Matt Sellner.
Hello.
The Free Cheese is a weekly video game podcast about video games, brought to you once a week by thefreecheese.com. This week we are talking about Sin and Punishment, the 2000 Nintendo 64 release. Before that, I want to know, as the game is set in the year 2007, the near dystopian future, what part of 2007 felt like the near dystopian future for you? Both Matt and Mark's eyes have gone wide right now.
I'm trying to remember
because I asked
time.
a really stupid question. What were you doing in 2007?
I had been a freshman in high school, so I got that going for me.
I graduated high school a year before. I guess I was trying to start community college, but didn't stick around for that long. But I did get a laptop out of that, and I remember I was animating. I was trying to get into animation, and I was using my laptop, and I think I was using Flash at the time, and I clicked a little too much, too quick, and what were we using? Were we using Windows Vista, I think, at that point?
Speak for yourself. I never used Vista.
Yeah, Vista or XP would have been around.
I think it was Vista with this one, and it just crashed, and I didn't save any of my work. So I got really mad because I was working on like lip syncing, like mouth movements, and I knew I would have to start over. So my uncontrolled rage, I punched the screen of my laptop and cracked it, and then got even more mad. But then I was able to rip off the monitor half of my laptop and hook up an actual desktop monitor to it, and the computer was still working. Because I didn't, all the hard drive and shit's under the keyboard, and I still had a disk drive, and I started playing Unreal Tournament again that way. Had like a little mouse hooked up to it and everything.
Yeah, so it sounds like you had like quite a that.
It wasn't all
future
on the
hacker net.
Yeah, like it wasn't all on the same day, obviously. Just within that year, just all that was.
No,
happening.
but yeah, within 2007, you are assembling a computer from parts and doing it your own way. So
yeah, and I had like a little guitar amp as my table.
That checks out.
Sitting on the floor.
Matt, how about you? 2007, what part of the weird, boring future did you adopt?
Guitar Hero and plastic peripherals.
So everything's plastic in this world of yours.
I guess, yeah. And a room full of plastic instruments that in no way will be useless in 3 years.
Did we know at the time that they were going to
Absolutely not
succumb to the fate?
Absolutely
Yeah,
not.
I guess we didn't.
No, because GameStop was buying them back, remember?
Were you in the woods, Joe, at this point?
2007? Yeah. Actually, yeah. I wasn't even thinking that, but you're right. And I have photographic evidence to prove it. Not specifically of me. There was a day where we just went wandering in the woods. I completely forgot about this until right now, but I can see it as clear as day. This is going to sound way lamer than it was. We were all wearing black and walking through the woods in midday. Mm-hmm. I remember at one point, several of the fellows had put on face paint in random. This sounds way, like we grew up in Norway or something, but and I remember Ben found a deer skull along the walk and picked it up with a stick and was carrying it around like on the end of a stick. I remember we just went and hung out. I don't remember what we even did. I remember somebody wrote a rap song about being in the woods. May or may not have co-opted the beat and rhythm of another rap song. But yeah, we were in the woods for a significant portion of 2007, I would say.
It's like,
I also just recently found a picture of myself from 2007, and that, I think, is the real dystopia. I had these shorts on. First off, I was wearing white tennis shoes
Okay.
I had shorts that reached my calf, and they were so wide around, like they were so big. I don't remember dressing with like that big of clothing, but
I think
very loose clothing.
I think I still have a pair of cargo shorts from like the 2010 era that are that big.
It's brutal. I don't get it.
I had a pair of cargo shorts I probably just got rid of not too long ago, or they're still around. They're in a giveaway pile. They're utility. Batman has his utility belt. I got my cargo shorts.
These were like I'm not denying the cargo short. I definitely had those. These were more of like I assume they came from Pacific Sunwear, but they were more of like a baggy, 2 pockets left and right, and maybe one on the back. But they were more of like a dress short, I guess, if you will. I have no idea, but they were.
I see what you're saying.
Ridiculous. They were black, and then I was wearing a red t-shirt, which I've long abandoned red as a color in my wardrobe. So it was very strange to see, me in red. Just can't do it. Especially the black and red combination. This very 18-year-old boy.
Like, if it's, like, for me, like, primary red is just a little too much. But if it's like my colors usually have to be muted.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dark red's okay.
Yes.
Yeah, my colors have to be muted.
I've slowly gotten to the point now where I'm not unlike Saki and Iron. I've been adopting a more utilitarian look. Single colors, no branding, I'm trying to be as...
Yeah.
Just, I don't know. Trying to blend in, with the surroundings. Much like a ruffian. That's a bad transition to talk about this week's video game, Sin and Punishment. Developed by Treasure with assistance by Nintendo R&D 1. Published by Nintendo. Released for the Nintendo 64. In Japan only. On November 21st, 2000. This is the weird part, because we usually do a back of the box quote, yeah? But this was never released in America. We would later get a virtual console release. Several. We'd get one on the Wii, we'd get one on the Wii U, and now it's on the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack with the Nintendo 64 catalog of games. But yeah, no real back of the box that I can quickly translate and read. We do, however, I have the full plot here if you want to hear a bit about the full plot.
Actually, that may help. There was a lot of things happening very quickly.
I mean, yeah, we can... The basic idea here is that... Or, you know what? Hold on. Before we do that, I would love to, actually, because I've played through this game... Let's call it twice. I've, started it a bunch and played through in chunks and whatever, a whole bunch. However, I would say I've played through it twice.
Right.
I don't think I could have told you what I've got in front of me in terms of plot. So I'm curious, Matt, what is your, right now, no influence, what is your interpretation of the events of this story?
Oh, this is...
Here, what's your back of the box description of this?
Back of the box, like game or plot?
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome to a world full of humanoid bugs. Take on our main protagonist and try to save the world from this bad man who is a commander. This on-rail shooter will take you through it's Japan, right? All kinds of sectors of Japan and into the sea and beyond.
Okay.
Come save the world from plastic peripherals.
Mark, what do you think?
I don't know. Don't know if I can beat that.
It was that and beyond. I know.
It's a very dystopian setting. Not sure what there is left to save, but you're at least trying to stop some sort of army going on. And you kind of, I mean, yeah, you're mostly one character, but you kind of switch through. But yeah, definitely on-rail shooter. I would say from the same system that gave you the beloved Star Fox 64 comes a similar experience, but on foot mostly. Even though no, it's still on rails, but I think the biggest feature would be switching between the shooting and the melee.
Yeah,
and it is a very cinematic experience.
So I did uncover the Nintendo.co.uk Wii U Virtual Console listings description.
I'll take it.
Sure.
Earth is under threat from ruffians, mutants bred to boost dwindling food stocks who have turned against their masters. As a young resistance fighter, face an onslaught of biogenetic monsters and corrupt military forces in your battle to save the planet. For the first time outside of Japan, you can experience the non-stop action of this Nintendo 64 classic, created by the shoot-'em-up masters at Treasure Co. Limited. Battle across land, sea, and sky, collect energy, time, and point bonuses. Get bonus! Rack up massive combos to earn extra continues, and face the wrath of enormous bosses. Plus, invite a friend to join in, controlling the gun sight while you move the character. Literally would I never do that.
That is definitely a little brother mode.
That is a little brother needs to get his own Nintendo 64 because there's no way I'm sharing. This game's difficult enough as it is in terms of control scheme.
Psyops had it. The Psyops thing was fun.
But in Psyops, that was like an optional input, or you could still control. I don't know. Yeah. There's a bit more to the plot that I've uncovered through reading, and there is a bit more you get throughout the game itself. I don't remember learning while playing the game that we had a planet-wide famine and that scientists developed a new genetically engineered species to raise as food. But that is what you're fighting in the game, is the ruffians who have now uprisen to no longer be food. You swap between sake and iron throughout the game. There's some plot moments that force you to play as iron. And in the end, you play as both of them together at the same time, if you will. In, I think, classic anime-influenced media, and many other media, it's not just, but it's a very tropish thing. You are on this adventure with Achi, kind of always guiding and pushing you along, only to find out in the end that Achi's the true villain. Yeah, so I guess, what were your first impressions of this game? Mark, let's start with you. You fire it up, you're like, this one's on the list, let's get into it.
I was not expecting a game to look, play, or sound like this on a 64. Like, this looks like it should have been a PlayStation game. Not to really discredit the 64, they're capable of having good things on there, but just the level of cutscenes, the style, the full voice work that this game has, and it doesn't sound awful. A lot of that was very impressive to me because I just never really had much of that. on the 64. Like you would, if people talked, like Star Fox probably had the most talking, but there was no real facial expressions because they were meant to be like puppet-like, and the mouth movements weren't really much. Right, and then they only had like maybe 2 or 3 cutscenes total, and even then it wasn't, a lot. It wasn't the cinematic piece and whatever. There wasn't a lot of it wasn't as stylish as Sin and Punishment.
And the 3 lines they record were annoying as fuck too.
Right, and like the system was capable of having like fully voiced like music and stuff too. Like it never sounded terrible, even though like not all games would have it. Like Tony Hawk, they didn't have the voice work and those tracks, and they were a little shorter, but you had a lot of tracks. But something like Mystical Ninja, like that had fully voiced theme song and a couple other songs on there, and that has voice work, but it's not like this. There's a lot of dialogue in this game, and I just wasn't expecting that. So it's very, very impressive, very stylish.
Yeah, that certainly stands out, especially for a game. You're right. Like Nintendo 64, the most you were getting. Think about Ocarina of Time, like one of the biggest games of the Nintendo 64, and there's no the voice samples are simply that. They're just quick little oh, but you're not getting much more than that. All of the text is on screen, which it is here as well. But the peculiar thing with this one is that it's fully voiced in English in its original release, with Japanese subtitles.
Yes.
The Virtual Console release that made its way over here they translated the menus so that you could navigate those in English. However, the subtitles and everything still remain. It's super, super strange. Matt, how about you? What was your first impression of Sin and Punishment?
This is another one of these games on the list where I kind of had no expectations. I have heard of it. I think I've seen it in action for 10 seconds, and the 10 seconds was that very bland intro level where it's just like orange with like the worms coming out. So I didn't expect it to kind of go the places it went. But no, I liked it very early. I wish I knew there was a melee button. Until that before that boss fight that forces it in like stage like 1-4 is somewhere around there.
Are you talking about the when you fight Brad?
It's the girl, or there's a girl on top of the helipad after you fight like that robot panther.
Oh, that one. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Right.
No, but no, I found the intro kind of difficult because of that, but. Yeah, I was digging this very early on. This was, I don't know, I wasn't thinking about the N64 thing, like what Mark was talking about. I was just kind of in it for the ride, not really thinking PS1 and on an N64, but, I don't know, it felt unique, and I think that might be why, because I knew it was, I know it was obviously N64, but it, when playing it felt unique, and that might be why. What Mark said.
Yeah. That is exactly why I picked this for the list. It feels incredibly unique, and I think it is still of all of the video games that have been released since this game came out, I think it's still incredibly unique. It feels modern. It's loaded with nuance and detail, but again, released on Nintendo 64. I think it looks really good. I think every stage feels different from the last. I think the character designs are so weird and cool. It's like a natural evolution of what Treasure did with Gunstar Heroes. Like the bodies are weird looking. The poses that they take are so bizarre, but they all work so well. And I think that the entire game throughout is incredibly well framed. Like the direction of the game visually, scene by scene, frame by frame, it rivals Metal Gear and some of the like finest video game and even like anime stuff. Like this, I think, for very intentional reasons, is very evocative of stuff like Evangelion and Akira throughout the entire,
I picked up those
your
vibes.
journey with the game. But I mean, I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit more about Evangelion because it's straight up like just kind of is, but yeah. But yeah, it's a huge game for a platform that it didn't make sense to be on, but here it is. I want to talk briefly about kind of the background of the game, the development a little bit. There's a really great Iwata Asks interview where the team who's working on Sin and Punishment Star Successor, which is the Wii sequel to the game released in 2009, kind of regroup and they talk about the original game a little bit and the new sequel and all of that fun stuff. There's some fun nuggets throughout that of information about development on the first game that I thought were interesting. One of the first things they talk about, which I think we'll talk about, is the strange approach to the control scheme. The Nintendo 64 had a very specific and unique controller shape, and most of them used what was called right hand position, which is kind of how you would hold the controller when you're playing Mario 64, where your left hand is in the middle, so you're controlling the analog stick with your left thumb. Your right hand is positioned on the right side, and you're kind of right there. This game, they specifically sat down and said, what if we make a game that is in left hand position, where your left hand is over the D-pad side, your right hand is over the analog stick. And that was how they designed this game and intended it to be played. Of course, they'd later add options to move that around and kind of like swap out where you're holding the stick. But that was the approach to design. And that is sadly not translated in most of or any of the modern ports of the game. The Switch Online collection, I think all of those Nintendo Online things, I think it's great that Nintendo is offering these things in an easy to access function. And I think that especially in the NES and the SNES, you see a lot of weird games that were not maybe even ever offered on Virtual Console, let alone just offered, period. I think it's cool that those are being put out there. Like there's some weird, cool stuff on there that people should check out. But there's no collection of manuals. You can't scan through and look through those things, right? And in some cases, I get it, who cares? But there is I think there's a fun part of looking through those. There's a lot of weird art and stuff like that you would get in those days that you don't get otherwise. But in a game like Sin and Punishment, it's almost required that you at least see a controller layout, because the modern control schemes don't quite explain it. And I eventually landed on something after I kind of went back, revisited the original manual, looked at it, and returned to the Switch version. But for me, I landed on, with a modern controller, using the D-pad to move my character, the right stick to aim, and the right trigger to shoot, with the right bumper, if you will, or R, to jump. And depending on how you're positioned, you can also use left trigger and left bumper for jumping. Did you both land on a suitable control scheme at some point?
I don't like saying that I occasionally have to play games on RetroArch, but in this case, I kind of have to say that's where I played this one at. I remapped my entire DualSense around this game.
So where did you end up?
My brain was broken. I couldn't do the left aim with left. I had to literally go into the controller settings and switch the right thumbstick to the left thumbstick actions and the left thumbstick to the right thumbstick actions. Just first-person shooters in the last 10 years or so, completely. I could not. I tried to learn. I sat down for about an hour fighting, relearning it. I couldn't. It was a steep hill to climb. But then, yeah, I ended up mapping. I think stayed on the equivalent of a ZL or an L2, and then jump I kept on R1. So I kind of kept the two fingers up top in separate spots to try to mimic the experience as much as I could. But yeah, I could not. I had to flip the sticks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't too different from you, Joe. Because like L and R were both jump, except like I gravitated to using L for jumping, and I only kept my right finger for shooting. But I would strafe with the D-pad and aim with the right stick. It was just more convenient that way because of the face buttons being right there. So if you switched between homing and non-homing for your gun,
right,
it's right there.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. Again, I think had we had the original manual readily available, I think that may have changed. Because I remember playing this on Wii U and not having that difficult of a time getting into it. And then here, it just felt, on Switch, it felt really weird getting into. And I eventually, once I kind of got it, I also forgot that there was the slash, that you had the melee attack, which would reflect certain projectiles and that stuff, which does become integral to success in this game. And I got like a few levels in, and I'm like, it finally clicked. I'm like, okay, I need to restart. So I just restarted the game and went through it again, and just like, okay, I got it now. But it's a weird game to get into when you don't know what you're.
Am I the only one who did the training mode before playing it?
Probably, yeah. I don't remember doing it.
Oh, I think I assumed the training mode was that first level.
I mean, it kind of is, but no, like they have like this little weird like character that's like it's like a little orb that has like just two eyes and just like a smiling grin of just like pointy teeth talking to you, telling you how to do everything. You're in like this weird like hologram like grid like level that's just you're just constantly running, and it gives you the time to try out everything. And that's when I learned about the melee being also the same button as the gun. And I was like, no, this isn't really that alien for me, because when I played Gotcha Force, I mean, you'd move how you would normally move, left stick and then right stick camera, whatever. But a lot of characters in that game have range and melee attacks, but the melee is only activated when somebody is close enough to you. You don't get to choose. So this was kind of similar with the way they do the melee and range. It's like when they're up close is the only one that gets activated. But it's funny, the training mode kind of had its own little like pointless narrative where like the final boss, like the training boss, was that little orb's father, and it thought that you were trying to steal her daughter.
Oh, I love that.
And then you just shot him enough until he went away. But yeah, that definitely gives you time to acclimate without the pressure. Not that like the first level was really that hard. I mean, obviously you can just jump into that and get used to everything. But I didn't
but the
really
first level never forces you to learn melee.
Yeah, I didn't have a hard time adapting to this, even with training mode.
Well, Treasure had a hard time adapting to the Nintendo 64, as it was notably a struggle to develop for. Not only the move from 2D to 3D, but also the Nintendo 64 itself. In the interview in the Iwata Asks, Iwata even cited difficulty for HAL in the years following its release. The Nintendo 64 released in 96, and HAL wouldn't put out its first games for the platform until 99 with Super Smash Brothers and the other one I already forgot. What was the other? Oh, Pokemon Snap. Sorry. That was another HAL release. So it took them 3 years. For Treasure, they first put together the design document for Sin and Punishment in 97, and it took them until 2000 to release it. So it took them a few years to really wrap their head around. One of the big things cited was the fact that you're playing in a 3D world, but you're shooting in 2D. So like the way the crosshair is moving in 2D. That took a long time to uncover, or not uncover, but a long time to make work and make feel right. One of the things that one of the programmers talked about was, even once they got it to work, they were able to make it feel good for shooting enemies, but they had no way to tell whether or not the player was being hit. So that was, again, like all of these little technical things that were brand new problems to have in 3D. One of my favorite bits of this interview is that Hitoshi Yamagami of the software planning and development group at Nintendo was producer on the sequel, but was director of the original game. And of Treasure, he says, quote, "To put it bluntly, they were a weird company." Of the game, he says, "It is among my top 3 most difficult games to develop. As for what was so difficult, usually when you ask when it will be done, the director will give you an estimated time. But with Treasure, they say, we don't know. We'll show you something when it's done." Once he was finally shown a prototype, Yamagami recalls that he was very impressed, and Iwata even goes as far to say that seeing it probably felt like a wonder that anyone could make a game like that on Nintendo 64. Yagami echoed the sentiment and added that he recalls the original difficulty of the game, and when he had first commented to Treasure that it was too hard, Treasure responded, "Then you're not good enough to be in charge of this project."
Dude, Treasure is hardcore.
Brutal.
I mean,
The
their
original
games are
title...
very difficult.
Are any of these people at From Software?
No, everybody's still a Treasure for the most part.
Okay.
And like,
Or a lot of them.
and at this point too, like, wasn't Treasure like exclusively like a Sega thing?
So yes, they had, well, okay. Treasure, for anyone who's unfamiliar with Treasure, they were strongly associated with Sega, but prior to Sega, and prior to Treasure, these were all Konami developers. So they worked on a lot of Konami stuff for the Famicom and Super Famicom,
I feel
and
that.
came up with the idea for Gunstar Heroes, presented it to Konami and said, we want to make this. And Konami said, we want to make a sequel to whatever. And fed up with that and thinking that players were looking for new things rather than sequels, they left, started Treasure, and they intended on working on Gunstar Heroes. They pitched it to Sega, and Sega said, you have no track record. But we'll give you this project. So they gave them McDonald's and Treasure Land as their first project. While they worked on that, partway through development, Sega said, okay, we see what you're capable of. We'll greenlight Gunstar Heroes. So they split into 2 teams, both working on each project to get them out. And at that point, they were very ingrained with Sega. They were one of the first developers to be shown the Sega Saturn. And they were able to do a lot of cool things with the Sega Saturn's enhanced sprite display on screen. They made a lot of Saturn stuff. A lot of Saturn stuff.
Yeah, Guardian Heroes stands out.
Yeah, Guardian Heroes.
A lot of heroes.
Radiant Silvergun was another one. They made Ikaruga for the Dreamcast. But yeah, putting this on the Nintendo 64 was a choice. And I actually don't know if they talked about that in the Iwata Ask, why they picked this platform. Because they were, like you said, so ingrained with Sega. But they are hardcore. And the one thing that stood out about this too, especially knowing that like this is very much it's Nintendo published, it's like Nintendo still owns the rights to these games, and it seems like there would not be another one without Nintendo's involvement. Yet the development process was so un-Nintendo. What we know, at least in the public, of Nintendo's working space or working method is, they prototype something, and once it feels good, then they bring a team in and they have all these people working on it, and it goes through so many passes and so many whatever. With Treasure, and again, like they talk about in the Iwata Asks, like there's a structure and there's, timelines, and they said like, you might not always hit those timelines, but you at least have a timeline, right? And if you're not going to hit it, you have good reason. With Treasure, it's like, when it's done, it's done. We're just going to work on it until it's right. And they will put small, sometimes 2-man teams together to just work on a game for years. And then eventually they'll bring more people in to work on it. And this project ended up having more people than any other Treasure project had to date by the time it was done. But initially it was only 2 to 4 people working on it. So, very wild development experience. while playing this, I talked a bit about the Evangelion influence, but that I could not escape so much that throughout subsequent playthroughs, when I was taking notes while playing, I wrote Evangelion twice without realizing I had already written it. I also wrote down ta.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. That's like this game just should have been called Taunt and Punishment.
Ta. I don't know. There's a lot of those little moments in the game that stuck with me, just like sounds and feelings and little sound bites. I don't know. This whole last few weeks, I've just heard these things. Just he also had strange powers. Saki, just all of that stuff, just still with me.
It's good voice work.
Cause I don't know. By the end of it, some of the stuff in the final cutscenes, it's very weird. It's almost like kids recording voiceover, but it's charming in its own way. And it has that dub quality. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Like a lot of anime back then, they just the way that dubbing was handled. It was I don't know how well translated everything would be, but just the way that the lines were delivered, it always felt like
they did it in one take.
Yes, but there's something charming about it feeling out of place. It's not fully out of place, but it doesn't feel like the actual genuine feeling that should have been conveyed. But at the same time, it's still okay because everything else makes up for it. It's a weird mix.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked earlier about N64 and audio and voice and voice lines and stuff. I wonder how much of this yes, there's probably that Resident Evil cheesiness to it, right? But I wonder how much manipulating the file to fit it into the cartridge maybe has something to do with the way the voice acting came off.
Yeah, you're probably not far off. They had to be very clever. One of the things they did cite in that Iwata interview as a difficult part of development was texture mapping in this game. When you think about this game, there's so many different enemy types, there's so many different areas, platforms, background pieces. There's a lot in this game, and to fit all of that in there, they had to be very clever with compression and things like that, because you didn't have a lot of room to work with the N64 cartridges.
Yeah,
and you did, but not as much as you would on a CD.
Yeah, and then given the aspect ratio, because we weren't widescreen yet at this point, so they kind of used that to their advantage with just using such a tight space to shoot everything.
Yeah. So one of the standout moments for me in the game was the fling forward to the New York section from 2007, where you're on the train and you slowly realize that you're playing as Iron, and you're running with a child who keeps calling you mama, and you slowly realize that this is a peek forward at the future of the two main characters, and that is their son that you're running through the thing with, and that son is later the playable character in the sequel on Wii. Fun fact. Cool. But I don't know, something about that just kind of, when revisiting this game this time, I remember thinking back on it, and the key moments of the game I remembered, the subway stood out, and then playing through it this time, it doesn't feel like it, because a lot of these levels end up just smashing together in a way, but that had an emotional weight to it, especially now being fresh, revisiting the story, where you're kind of realizing, I already forgot her name, Achi. You're realizing that Achi is not maybe everything you thought, and you're being manipulated into something here. But I remember that being a pivotal moment in my memory of the game, and then going through it again, it was just I don't know, a cool set piece.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff you don't think about when initially playing it, because everything's just a spectacle and you're just shooting just to shoot, basically. But I think once the context is more thrown in front of you and you actually get time to think about it, because you don't really have time to think about it when you're just when you're in it. It's just constant action. But yeah, like almost everything has the context to it, and it's not just there just for the sake of being there. It's cool. It is very anime though, but that's not a bad thing. I say it's a good thing.
How
did you guys like this? Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say how arcadey the UI is. Like, if you would, without knowing much about this game, if you would have told me this was a port from an arcade, I fully would have believed you. It's just weird between the timer and even the cutscenes having the press A to skip or whatever. Like, it totally, that one little like line at the top kind of, I don't want to say makes you want to overshadow the story or what. Like I don't know. It makes you that one little line maybe not care about like paying attention as much. Not that I didn't pay attention, but like
no, I
care. It's weird because like when you play like a like in the arcade, like a Time Crisis, could not fucking tell you what Time Crisis 2 is about. I beat it a couple times, but I couldn't tell you what's going on. It's because
they just needed right. They just needed something to string it along.
Right.
There's no depth really.
It's weird. It's a weird thing to make it feel so arcadey, but have it like there's stuff here. It's there's definitely beats that are worth following.
Yeah, there's a depth to it. There, to your point, there's a. Once you beat the game, you do unlock a harder difficulty, and you also have the ability to like. There is a score chase. There's an optimal scoring in this game. High scores, etc. So, like, I think to the arcade piece, like that stuff's in there because if you want to chase high scores, you can quickly skip through the story and all of that stuff. But it's there if you want to dive in. I think. I'm not positive, but I also feel like the cutscenes end up adding to your time because it's all timed how long it takes you to complete, and I feel like those also play into it. So, yeah. Matt, did you like this video game?
I did. I actually very much enjoyed it. One small gripe, and honestly, if they didn't show me that they could pull it off, I wouldn't have want more of it. But that last level, despite it being hard as balls, I liked the side-scrolling thing. I wish we would have had another stage or two of that, just to mix it up. Especially like that level inside the ship. It's a lot of it's like at this like top-down angle, and it's the turrets like on the side. And then you usually have to clear like the center thing that's controlling another turret, and then once you clear that, you kind of advance, and then you have those weird like right angle turns where they put a health and you think you're lined up for it, but then you miss it because the fucking camera throws you off, I was yelling at my screen a lot at those times. But like stuff like right there, if they could have figured out like or made that another one in those side scrolling levels, I actually really liked it. I thought it was unique. I was not expecting it when it happened, and that's honestly my only gripe is I kind of want more of that, but that's kind of their own damn fault for showing they were capable of it.
I'm trying to remember if the sequel does more of that or not, but yeah, no, those moments felt good. You don't fly in this one, but you are floating in this one, right? Like you're kind of always on a platform that's up in the air or something. The sequel, you straight up just push up to use your jetpack and start hovering and flying around the screen anywhere you want. So it's bizarre, but yeah. Mark, did you like this video game?
Yeah. Even when like I didn't know too much about it, and The only introduction might have been through, like, maybe the sequel first, seeing that marketing, or you might have seen the assist trophies in Smash, and just like, who is this? And then finally getting into it, and just the weird anime like narrative, the visuals, the unique combat. This is a very trademark game for sure.
Excuse my ignorance. Well, sorry, I'll put it this way. For the viewer, or for the listener, what is the assist trophy in Smash? For someone that may not know, that's definitely not me.
Like, what is an assist trophy?
No, I know what it is. What's the sin and punishment? I don't know.
I'm not sure if it's just Aki or Aki and Iron or whatever, but I know in the latest Smash, I believe it's just Aki, but like he'll go around and just, shoot whoever and slash whoever, and that's basically all he does, but he just stands out.
Oh,
like,
he's just annoying. He's the one that chases you, right?
Yeah, like
okay.
He had the orange shirt and the pants or whatever, and he's just like crazy hair, and it almost in screenshots it looks like it would be like a playable character. It's like, oh great, just another anime sword fighter, but he has a gun. I don't know. It's just he stands out in that weird way, and he might have been just a trophy before that in the previous Smash games, and you'd be able to read a little bit about him. And just from that point on, it was just curiosity.
Yeah, fun fact. First added as an assist trophy in Smash Brawl for the Wii. He would then not be... He was in Smash Brawl and Smash 4, but was not in Ultimate. But had that same thing in both, where it's just kind of like drop down, and he does like a crisscross all over the screen.
Tall.
I'm trying to pull up the Smash Brothers Dojo archive site, but it's taking its sweet time. But you can still go back and like look at that and see the full breakdown of, his addition to the game. In Smash Ultimate, though, there is a Mii Gunner costume you can buy as add-on content that lets you dress up as the titular Glass Soldier.
Yeah, why didn't we include him and like take out, I don't know, one of the 18,000 Fire Emblem characters that we have?
Even
it had the same moveset. It looks like a different skin. That's not...
yeah. He would have been cool. Yeah, the original post from November 22nd, 2007, which was a Thursday, closes out by saying, he rivals just about any main character. There were many requests from users for his inclusion, and he is pretty cool, so I did what I could to include him. After all, this game does let you enjoy a dreamcast of supporting characters.
Dreamcast.
Yeah.
Besides his inclusion in Smash, my first awareness of this game was its availability on the Virtual Console. I remember when it was released, because I don't know about YouTube, but I remember on Virtual Console Update Day, even though there were articles published by the time, days ahead or whatever, where you knew it was coming, it was still exciting to come home, turn on the Wii, go to the Wii Shop channel, and look at what was released. And I remember it being released and seeing what was new, and it was like, wait, all the N64 games are 1,000 points. Why is this one 1,200? Oh, because it's some Japanese thing? I don't know what that is. And I wouldn't touch it for years. But I remember that was my first exposure to it, and like learning about it, and it was like, oh, it was only released there. It felt so weird and strange, but yeah, I'm happy that out of the gate with the Nintendo 64 stuff on Switch, it was one of the first games to be offered, because I think it should be played, enjoyed, and I hope that in a couple weeks at Tokyo Game Show, Treasure potentially announces something. It's all but been confirmed that it's actually just going to be a re-release of Radiant Solar Gun that Treasure is working on, but a girl can dream. Final word on Sin and Punishment.
Phew. I don't know. I think it is. If you're a fan of the 64 and its library, this is one you should not sleep on. And just think about the words "glass soldier" for a bit.
Yeah. Matt?
It's a good game. I think, to kind of echo what you just said, I was shocked to learn how available this was, despite it never properly released in NA or North America.
Yeah,
it's weird. You don't see many. I can't even think of one. I can think of one that hasn't come over, but yeah, you don't see that a lot. It's unique.
Especially for Nintendo, who is pretty particular about kind of preserving the game experience for the audience. To have, this one come over, it's neat. My guess is that they put it on there because they knew they were making the Wii sequel, right? And they were going to put that out in America, but I like this game. I looked it up this week because I kind of wanted to grab a copy of it this game made me want to revisit the Nintendo 64 as a whole. I've been kind of toying around with it for a little bit. The Japanese Switch Online collection added the custom Robo games, which I'd never played, so I've been thumbing my way through one of them, the first one on there. And playing that a bit kind of reminded me of how weird the N64... Because I think when we look back at N64, we think often of Super Mario, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Star Fox. There's like a good solid chunk of games that we think of, and I don't think Sin and Punishment is one of them, but I think it should be.
Yeah.
And, Custom Robo was the one where I was like, right, there was some weirder stuff on here, and this too, like there's some really good games for the Nintendo 64. So, mine is still, I've got it hooked up, ready to roll, but I haven't really jumped in to play anything, and I was like, maybe I'll import a cart for Sin and Punishment. And I don't think it was too terribly to get it like a box copy. I don't think it was bad at all. Like sub $100, not bad. You know what I'm saying? Where some of these old N64 games, like just the cart is going to run you 80 to 100.
Yeah. Were these region locked?
That I think no, but I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure it's not.
It's so
weird.
I figured that the development of this game, it wasn't, it was Japan exclusive, but yet had fully voiced English work. It's just so strange that there was no marketing over here for that.
I think with, like, if I had to guess, with it coming out November 21st, 2000,
right,
the time that it would have taken to fully localize it in English, to translate all the on-screen subtitles over, to do all of that work, they probably would have been looking at another year to get it out here. And at that point, the GameCube's on its way. By 2000, 2001, the stuff we were getting on N64 was already like throttling what the 60, like that's when we're starting to get Perfect Dark and
I think Majora's Mask
some other stuff
was
like
2000.
that. Which one?
Majora's Mask I think was 2000.
Yeah, right. And like at that point it was like we were right up against the PS2. Like Nintendo had to be careful about what it was bringing out. So you should check this game out if you have not checked this game out. It's very, very, very good. And I guess along with it, you should probably watch Akira and Evangelion if you haven't done that, because if you like Sin and Punishment, you'll probably like those, or vice versa. So we've reached the end of this here episode 469, and at the end of every episode this season, we are ranking the game we're talking about against the list of games we've already talked about. I've got the list pulled up. Listener, if you want to follow along with the list or check out anything we've talked about so far that you may have missed, you can do that at thefreecheese.com/the-list. Mark, Matt, off the cuff, I feel strongly that Sin and Punishment makes it into what we've dubbed our elite category of video games, which right now is standing at anything 7 or above.
Okay. Yeah, I was definitely thinking higher up on this list too. It's always weird trying to place this as we just get done talking about it, because I think it's, when our feelings are at our strongest about it. But then, like, after some time, you're like, yeah, well, does it go there? And, we had an whole episode about that. But,
yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking, well, we know my opinions for this, but I'd put it right above Rez.
That's what I'm fighting internally right now. Is this better than Rez? My gut, I think, says no, but I'm open to conversation.
I'm sure the gameplay for Rez is a lot smoother, and I still need to play the part that I should have played. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm too fixated on the potential of Sin and Punishment and just how they handled so much with such limitations. For some reason, that is sticking out to me. But control-wise, I could definitely see Rez being, I guess, a more enjoyable time to most.
Well, the thing with Sin and Punishment over Rez in terms of controls is once you figure out how to play Sin and Punishment, I like playing this more than I like Rez. Rez, I felt like, because it's so intrinsically tied to music and being on the beat, I always felt like sometimes if like you can get in sync with Rez, but I often felt like I was falling off the beat of Rez and fighting against that. And when you do get in the rhythm, Rez is something transcendent, to be a little hyperbolic. But Sin and Punishment, it just has that, I think, that arcade style shooting where if you miss something, it's not the end of the world. Where Rez, I felt like if I missed something, I really failed. And this, I just felt like, the more I'm taking out, the better. As long as I don't get hit, I'm fine. Which is two different game types, but...
Yeah.
I maybe put this above Pikmin 3 is where I was landing. So if you're both kind of right in... It sounds like we're all in this little sweet spot. So Matt is making teeth at the idea of above Pikmin 3. So how do we feel about that?
I like Pikmin 3 way better.
Okay.
Yeah, like I would definitely I would go, if you gave me them two and which one I would go back to, I would think I would go back to Sin and Punishment. I'm probably because of the time sync is not as much. But Pikmin 3 is a pretty solid game.
Yeah.
Something about it.
I'm good with.
Yeah, something about it just feels wrong to put it up, even though I like Sin and Punishment.
Matt, what do you think about it sitting above Rez Infinite?
I mean, I dug Rez a lot. It's tough for me personally, but I feel like that's where we're heading, and that's fine.
I think it fits for me above Rez. I love Rez, and I think Rez, when those moments hit where you do connect with it, it is very... It's like a religious experience. It's not anything short of that. But Sin and Punishment, I think, just wholly is just such a great video game.
I think the main reason for me is if you go high score chasing, the Rez stuff is a bit more. The way they stage it, it's more bite size. For Sin and Punishment, you'd be replaying game, right?
You would, but you do have, the option to save and quit and continue.
Fair.
There's those things. So there's,
Again, I'm not fighting this. It's not worth the energy.
It's like that. No, I think.
No, No, I'm not saying. No, I'm not totally strong that Rez is in my opinion, the better game here at all. I think that's how I land, but I'm fine with it above it on the whole of the list.
You got your Pikmin. So Sin and Punishment comes in at number 5. For those not looking at the list, right now our number 1 is Wii Sports, followed by Quake at number 2, Portal 2 at number 3, Pikmin 3 at number 4, and now Sin and Punishment, number 5.
I feel like it should be Pikmin and Punishment. Pikmin feels like a way later sequel. Pikmin feels like the Nier Automata to Sin and Punishment.
Speaking of Nier, in closing, was there anything else that this game reminded you of Sin and Punishment? Because it definitely gave me some of those Nier vibes. It also gave me Parasite Eve vibes. Some other things about it that just kind of felt similar and familiar.
This might be a little too on the nose, but Zone of the Enders.
Yeah.
I think I still have not played Zone of the Enders, but I was getting a mechy feel from it, and I think that might be why.
Yeah.
I think the artist for Sin and Punishment worked on Zone of the Enders.
That wouldn't surprise me.
Also, briefly, before we close out, did anyone think we were fighting mechs for a bit, and then come level 2, you realized it was like bugs?
It's like a little bit of both.
Okay. I thought I was fighting mechs for the first.
I think because of the low polygons of everything, a lot of things just felt mechy no matter what. Like even the soldiers. So
I would just see if I was alone in that thought.
No.
It was I thought bugs right away with the initial kind of arc enemies that you fight, but then the big weird dragon thing that comes by, that felt very robotic. So well, this has been episode 469, Sin and Punishment. If you like this, of course, you can go to thefreecheese.com and check out all of the episodes we've ever done. You can also come back next week where we'll be talking about the Sega Genesis classic, X-Men 2 Clone Wars. Stay tuned for that. Until then, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, listener, for listening. Goodbye.